welcome to All Things Grace Podcast. I am your host. I am here with the amazing Vivian Phillips, and I am so super excited to have this conversation today. I have been wanting to have this conversation. Side note, before I even go any further, I told my sister, I said, listen, I just asked Vivian, and I was expecting her to say, I'll have my people, call your people, maybe, and she's like, it's you, of course. And I said to leave, and I said, I went and started crying. That is how much I love me some Vivian Phillips. So
and I love me some Michelle and Nicola. I love you all. You're wonderful.
Thank you so much. So everybody, get ready for an unforgettable episode because I have this privilege to introduce and to welcome the incomparable Vivian Phillips, someone who I've always really looked to as a mentor and a leader in our community. So she's definitely a role model. She's a communications professional, longtime civil arts leader. You served as the director of marketing communications for the Seattle Theater Group. Is that?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And has also served as adjunct professor at Seattle University's Master of Fine Arts Leadership Program, currently advisor to the Arts Ecosystem Program for Radio and Television. In 2017, completed your third term as chair of the Seattle Arts Commission, and is now, among all the other things, I'm sure I left out a lot, but of all the other things, you are the founder of ARTE NOIR, a platform celebrating Black art and culture, but just above all, just a dynamic, beautiful soul who has greatly impacted me personally and Seattle as a whole. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the honor.
Yes. So how are you feeling today and why?
I feel great today. The sun is shining. I am not terribly behind in my work. I still got a long list of to-dos, but I feel like I'm going to get through them. And I have two favorite times of year. May is one of them. And usually because we get a lot of sun and rain in Seattle, but what that does is it makes everything so green. So I just feel really energized by all the green that surrounds me, except for the green that I need to go cut back, right? But it just there's something about nature and being able to actually witness the cycles of nature and this particular growth period in May. So it really energizes me.
Yeah. Well, I want you to take us back. Now, God, goodness gracious. Do I have to give years? I don't want to give years, but I was at Langston Hughes. I was working there at the time. It was Cultural Arts Center. Now I think it's just called Langston. I don't even know what it's even called anymore in Langston. But that was really the bedrock of our community, where I met a lot of the great leaders in our community, such as yourself. But can you take me back to when you were a radio show host?
Oh, wow.
Walk me through the journey of, now here we are at ARTE NOIR. You've done all these things. So, I know it's a lot to cover, but just some high levels of what was your journey like?
Well, if I can remember that far back, I can say that I was 19 years old when I first started working in radio. And I was not an on-air person. I worked in radio for, I think, something like 7 years or more before I ever went on the air. And it was not a time for women to be on radio. We're talking about the early 70s, actually. And the only shifts that women would be given were those overnight, sexy evening.
Oh, come on.
I'm serious. You could only be on it, talk like this. But I wanted to do daytime. And so I just kind of hung around the radio. I was just on text, actually, with Frank P. Barrow, who is the person that hired me the very first time to work in radio. But I ended up learning everything about radio. I started as an engineer. and a promotions person. I worked in the sales department. I was a traffic director. And when I say traffic director, that's the continuity director. That's the person that schedules all of the spots on radio. I was at KYC for a while, then I went to KKR and KISW, did work there. And then Robert L. Scott actually hired me on the air. Um, I can look back and say I was highly successful, which it cracks me up when I run into people now. I mean, that was 40 years ago. I don't even know how long ago that was. And they say, I used to listen to you when I was a kid. I'm like, serious? Really? Okay. And the fact that I was only on air on KYC for 3 years. So it feels to people, I think, because I was the only female on daytime for a very long time, like I was there forever. And it just isn't true. But I'm enamored by the fact that people remember me from way back then. So kind of fast forward, I went into television. I worked in television for a while. I worked in public relations for a long time. I went to work at the Paramount Theater and worked on the restoration of that facility. And that was where, prior to that, is how I really kind of got involved with Langston Hughes. Um, it was really an interesting confluence of activities because I was working with Langston Hughes, working with Steve Sneed as a volunteer, and someone noted my leadership at Langston Hughes, and it's a historic building.
That's right.
Turns out that Langston Hughes was designed, the Bicker Holum Synagogue was designed by the same person that designed the Paramount Theater. Benny Proteka, and he designed the interior of the Paramount. And so we had done this upgrade at Langston Hughes, and put $1 million+ help raise all the money for that to do the initial seismic upgrades and some interior support. And they noted that, and they were working with the person who had first purchased the Paramount. And so they recruited me to come work with them. And I did all of the public fundraising for that $32 million restoration project.
Wow.
So the beauty of that is that part of using public funds requires that you provide a public benefit. And so that's how the summer musical got to the Paramount Theater. So the Langston Hughes Summer Musical, I was able to write into the contract with the city of Seattle that they would be at the Paramount Theater for 10 years. And I think after that 10 years expired, or there may have been, some interruptions in that because they did work at the Moore for a while, or you may have started at the Moore. I can't remember, but I know it was the Moore and the Paramount Theater. So yeah, I went back to work in television, worked in public policy, worked as the director of communications for Mayor Paul Schell. I've been thinking about what is the one thing that most people would not know about me. And it is probably that I was the commander of information for WTO when that happened in Seattle in 1999. Yeah, it's a thing that people would not know about me. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And all of that just kind of led to me having really great relationships with policymakers within the city of Seattle, understanding how the city, the county, and the state works, and how those intersections around support for the arts really are critical. So I was on the Seattle Arts Commission for 6 years, and was on the For Culture Board for 3 or 4 years. And I was chair for 1 year. And, when I was ready to kind of step out of the work environment, if you will, I started consulting. And I ended up doing art plans and working in arts. You mentioned the Arts Ecosystem Project. That was right up my alley. But when the developers were working on Midtown Square, they invited me to work on their art plan. And after saying no 3 times, I finally said yes. Because I started to understand that, and maybe I always knew this, but when you see your community changing, like
Mhm.
we saw the central area change over the course of 20 years, part of what I'm not interested in is complaining about it, but
Mhm.
I'm very interested in being a part of how that change can positively impact my community. So I ended up working on that project, and out of that sprung Art Noir.
Ah,
Yeah, so I did not, it was not my intention, but I did want a place where all of my experience in public relations, marketing, and the arts could actually come together. And that was the online publication. And when this opportunity for a physical space came up, it made sense. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's so okay. I didn't know any of that context, and I'm a such a I know I'm an introvert. I know I'm a loner. I get it. No,
Yeah.
when I was out the other day, when I ran into you, they were like, "Where have you been?" I'm like, "Seattle." I mean, I'm here. I'm here. I'm at home.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah.
And so it's just really interesting to learn all this backstory. So, but you've mentioned all of these different communicator, you were a builder and a creator, you bring people together and that make those synergistic connections for on behalf of our community. Of all of the things that you've done, of all of those things, which one gives you the most life? Like where are you in your zone of excellence, your zone of genius? Like there's a lot of things I can't do, but this thing I do well, I thrive at it, and I'm good at it. What would be that?
Collaboration is a joy for
Mm,
me. I love work. I can only see success through collaborative efforts.
mm,
I get a lot of credit for doing a lot of different things, but I've done nothing by myself.
mm,
Nothing. So when I have the opportunity to work with a team of individuals, when we have a shared vision about something, that is my comfort zone. And when I left the Seattle Theater Group, that was 2017. I left one of my most favorite teams ever. I
mm,
worked,
mm,
my team was like 10 strong. And I just loved working with these people. And
yeah,
it's interesting how things happen because when COVID came up, some of the folks got laid off from STG.
mhm,
Well, I was lucky enough to engage with one of my, I can't say one of my favorite people, but she was one of my favorite people on the team.
mhm.
And she now works for us. And
Mm.
she has been the,
Art Noir.
yeah, well, yes, she works for us. She has
Wow.
worked with me on the editorial since the very beginning. She
Mhm.
worked with me on the podcast, and she is now our editorial director. And she is also the person who does all of our marketing and social media. She's fabulous, and I love her.
Mhm. Mhm.
So and working with Jasmine is like this incredible gift. I
So I
mean,
was going to ask you about that. What
yeah,
to work with your daughter?
that is, it's hard to describe because while we have always worked together in some way, whenever I was doing projects, I would be like, I gotta call Jasmine. When I
Mhm.
did the Ma'afa and Sankofa Theater, she was the stage director. She was my right hand.
Mhm.
I'm the executive producer, but you need somebody who's gonna execute. And she's always been my executioner. That sounds kind of negative. Sounds a little bit negative, but if you look at it from a positive perspective. And and she was doing great work at Langston. It was a full circle time for her because her first job was at Langston
That's
Hughes.
That's right.
right? When you were there.
Yeah.
And she was the first employee when the nonprofit organization Langston was established. And I
Mhm.
was part of that. I was on the inaugural board and all of that. But I've learned to recuse myself appropriately when it comes to decisions that relate to, a relative.
Mhm.
But she was doing amazing work at Langston. And when I was thinking about, you know, I wanted to establish this organization, this physical space, but I never saw myself as the primary staff person. I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm prone to, telling people where they might go. But and that's not what I wanted, I wanted I wanted a whole different vibe there. And so when I was
Mm.
working with my board, and we were kind of developing this operational plan and all of that, it just turned out that what literally Jasmine and I were traveling together, and I had this aha moment. I was like, well, wait a minute, what about you? And then I was hesitant because I was like, well, the whole nepotism thing.
Mhm.
But I'm like, people do this all the time. Why am I
Mhm.
concerned?
Yep.
And what better way to have my vision implemented than by someone who knows exactly who I am?
Mhm.
So that has worked out beautifully. And
Mm.
she's done an incredible job. And I'm
Mm.
just so proud of her and proud to
Mm.
be in this position.
What about Janae? How's
Well,
Janae?
well, Janae is great. Janae is great. So, Janae is the she's all tech. So
Mm.
she builds websites and she does back end UX development. She has had this career in in the tech industry that
Mhm.
I don't think I can afford. That's kind of the bottom line. But she is always available to
Mhm.
us. So everything that we do and have done that has a outward facing component to it and a tech back end component, she always takes a look and verifies and helps us develop all of that. So yeah, she's involved. You think, duh, I'm actually going to have her
Yeah.
involved as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's a very high-minded individual, and I don't say that negatively. I
Mhm.
say that because of the way that she thinks,
Mhm. Mhm.
and her processing of technology is way beyond my capability.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't even know the right questions to ask her,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, but it's a blessing to have her around.
Yeah, that is awesome. There's this saying, and I'll give you the high level of what I think it means, but it's basically, your the mother is evidence through the kids, right? Basically,
Mm,
like who you are as a mother is shown
mhm.
in how your kids work, and the fact that you want to work with them, and that you not want to, but you do, and you trust their genius, and you trust
Yeah,
their magic, and you trust their brilliance.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think,
It's a gift and it's a blessing. And
yeah,
I don't take it lightly. I
yeah,
do not.
yeah. That
I
is.
appreciate them. And I have 3 kids. It's so funny because people think I only have one. I think Jasmine is my long. You have it. You happen to know.
I think we think Jasmine's your sister, and the other ones are your baby. Jasmine.
Right, right, right. And Andre worked with me during the time that I was at the Paramount Theater.
Mhm,
And he's another. I mean, I'm just gifted with 3 brilliant individuals.
mhm, mhm,
And I learned so much from him. He's got this memory that he can take a concept and then make it a real thing in a way that I can't. And so I'm just like really blessed.
Wow, so beautiful. You know, one thing I've always thought about you, Vivian, you know, just watching you move in community, move in spaces, and everything about you, and I mean literally from the way you walk to the way, you know, earlier when you're like, yeah, I can't be the only employee because I might want to tell you where I think you should go. Right. And I've always thought, wow, she's free. That's what freedom looks like to me.
Yeah.
You ever recognize, like, wow, I live a free life, or I intentionally create my life in a way where I can be free to say, to move, to stop, to go, to leave, whatever it is I want to do? Was that intentional in how you thought about things that you took on? Or
I think that in my early 20s, I understood how the importance of two things: integrity and service.
mm,
And so the one thing that I have never well, I've always kind of been aware of, is that people cannot challenge my integrity.
mm,
I
mm,
will, bend over backwards in my own space to
mhm.
make certain that I am who I say I am,
Yeah.
and that if I give you my word, that my word is my word. I
Mhm.
am going to do what I say I'm going to do. And I'm not so full of myself that if I find I can't do something, that I won't say it. I
Yeah.
won't say, I am not capable of this.
Mhm.
And those are the things that have just been really, really important to me, which has led to my capacity for living not just a free life, but a liberated life.
Mhm.
I do not find myself or feel bound or conflicted or oppressed by anything. Not
Wow.
at all.
That's beautiful. I really hope people stop and rewind that part and repeat it, because there's so much evidence out there in the world that says this is the way that you're oppressed, this is the way that you're confined, this is the, you know, so it takes an intentionality to choose a life of liberation. Now,
Yeah.
I said I said freedom and you said more like liberation. How do you see those two different?
Well, I think when you are free, that means that you can move around in a certain way. When you are liberated, your mind is open.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Right? When you have true liberation, your mind controls your freedom.
Mm. Okay.
That's how I see it,
That's right. Yeah.
right? So, just like if we just take, for instance, the way in which our Black community in Seattle has changed, right?
Mhm.
We come from an environment in this community that restricted our movement. We
Mhm.
can only live in this redlined community. And that has a particular impact on the way that you live your life when you've had that kind of restriction. When
Mhm.
you have a liberation, you can live within a confinement, but be expansive beyond the confines. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like I never felt confined. I
Mm.
never felt confined. I was raised in this neighborhood where where I live again, I should say.
Oh wow.
um,
Okay.
uh, and I just, my liberation is a part of, how do I say this? So while I live in Seattle, I am a citizen of the world.
Mhm.
That's my liberation. You know, I I traveled the world, not every place.
Mhm.
But, this little girl from the Central District who it just, who would have thought? But I never saw myself as constricted as this little girl from the Central District who could only do certain things.
Why? How do you think? Why not? I mean, so many people around us do, right? So
Yeah.
what was it about your life that you knew that you were liberated?
I believe in universal guidance
Mm-hmm.
and being silent and obedient. And I don't know, I don't know when it was that I read The Alchemist, but
Oh,
I do believe that the universe conspires on our behalf if
yes.
we allow it to do so. So
Yeah.
I'm not one that pushes hard, pushes hard. I don't have this vision of grandeur. I never have. I've
Mm-hmm.
always had a vision of, being what the universe said I could be.
Mm-hmm.
And what I recognized, and I go back and I will say that I'm a big old wannabe. I wanted to be this. I wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be, all these things that I was never really good at. So I found my freedom in making space for people who were good in those areas. And
Mm-hmm.
I was good at making the space for them.
Ah, wow. Okay.
And that's what my career and my life has been about, making space for other people to be their best selves. And it's, just so happens that that's been in the arts. I
Yeah.
mean, look at Justin.
Ah,
Justin Mecca is probably evidence, in addition to, and you talked about Jasmine and other folks, but Justin to me also is someone who is evidence
mhm.
of, you know, me doing the right thing. I'm not taking credit for any of Justin's success, but what I know for sure is that my godson has
Mhm.
leaned and looked toward me for guidance, support, and as a sounding board. And I have told him over and over and over again, don't worry about it. You got this.
Mhm.
What's for you is going to always be for you. And this move that he made, I mean, he's a successful theater director. I have traveled all over the country to see what he's doing when I can.
Mhm.
And to see him now become this budding filmmaker, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, he's living his dreams.
that's right. Mhm.
And so is his wife, Farah.
Mm,
She's a prosecuting attorney in Oberlin. She is on the school, she's the chair of the school board, I think. And, I think she's going to run for a judgeship. They're amazing.
mhm.
And both of their boys are the most brilliant individuals ever. So that's my freedom.
Yeah,
That is my freedom. That is my liberation. I get to experience this wonder and wonderful
yeah.
successes that people around me have. Look at you. I mean, honey, Dr. Majors, Dr. Michelle Majors. Look at Nicola. Look at y'all.
Yeah, yeah. That's definitely, you're looking at your legacy because you've touched us in these ways that those conversations that you spend 5 minutes with somebody, you never know if that is a life-changing conversation.
True,
You've had a
true.
couple of them at Langston Hughes that I remember one. Um, and I was like, wow, I thought about back to that day and we were having a conversation and, um, I think it was something to the effect, the question that you asked me was, if I had to paraphrase the whole thing, like, I got to do it, I can't do it. I'm not, basically, whoop, whoop, I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. And you, the same that you did when I asked you to be on my podcast was the exact same thing you did there. You're like, you're you. I'm sorry. What? I mean, the way you just, and I was like, she probably won't remember it because you say things like that to people so much. You know what I'm saying? You lift people up so much, and I was like, wow, that is it. I wish I could remember it, but I was like,
Mm.
I remember it anyway because you say you always encourage and uplift. So, wow. Question:
Yeah.
of all the people you interviewed and been in connection with, so this is kind of a two-parter. what has been like the most amazing connection or interview you've ever done with somebody? And then I will tell you ask you, what was it like to interview Trevor Noah?
Oh God.
That was my favorite of watching you interview him. That was
Oh,
such a good interview, Vivian.
I so adore Trevor Noah, and I've read his books. My first introduction to South Africa was probably during the anti-apartheid movement, back in the, what was that, the 70s,
Oh, wow.
80s, whenever that was. But I
Yeah.
read a book called Kaffir Boy by Mark Matabani back in probably the 80s. And it was this South African boy and his relationship with his mother. And so Trevor Noah has this incredible relationship with his mother, and that expanded being with Black women in general, right? And so I kind of felt this like mothership with him before I ever met him. I just thought, this is a brilliant young man, and I adore him. That was a joy. It was so easy to talk to him because I felt like I knew him. I just felt like I knew him, and his response was that I made him feel like we had known each other, and that's my goal when I'm interviewing people, is to have this, comfortable conversation, and that was amazing. I try to think about I've interviewed so many people. I've had such a charmed and blessed life to interview, everybody from Harry Belafonte to, Terry McMillan and Ta-Nehisi Coates and, Alice Walker, all of these different people. My interview with Ruby Dee was probably my most memorable interview. She held my hand throughout the whole interview.
What?
As she talked about Martin and Langston and, and
chills. Yeah, chills.
And I will never, ever, ever forget her holding my hand and talking to me like she had known me forever. That is my absolute most memorable. I really enjoyed interviewing Michelle Ndegeocello, who is talk about introvert. She's a genius, obviously, but this incredible introvert who really shies away from interviews. And after our interview, it's so funny because the next day I was getting on an airplane and she was sitting in first class and I was passing by her and she said, "Hey, Vivian," she said, "I have an interview coming up in Los Angeles, and if I can make it possible, I would like for you to come do it." Now that didn't happen, but for her to say that to me, I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
And I interviewed her twice, and they were both wonderful, wonderful interviews.
Wow.
So those are I think those are most memorable. I interviewed Bobby Seale. That was great. We talked about his barbecue sauce. I love Bobby Seale. I interviewed John Hope Franklin Jr., the son of John Hope Franklin. That was a deep conversation as well, just talking about the history. Henry Louis Gates, that was a recent interview. I interviewed him in September of last year. And oh my God, that was so much fun. Because you ask Henry Louis Gates a question, and he's not going to answer the question until he's good and ready to answer the question, right? He's got 13 stories to tell. And it was just like we had known each other forever. So that was a lot of fun.
Did you interview him for your podcast?
No. I interviewed him for Homestead Community Land Trust, for their fundraiser. I don't think that it is, I don't think it was recorded at all. Um, but that was a delightful interview. I'm going to stray off of uh, my favorites for a moment because I do want to mention two other interviews that were most touching.
Mm.
And that was one with Leslie McSpadden, who is the mother of Michael Brown.
Mm.
And the other was with Trayvon Martin's
Ooh.
parents. Those two interviews were memorable, touching, and I will say as well, to some extent, I can't remember what we talked about. And the reason for that is because there was this energy of my own personal remorse for what they had been through that kind of topped everything.
Mhm.
I know the interviews went good. I know they were good interviews. They went well. But it's just like when I try to recall the content of what we talked about, the only thing I can really do is go back to the books that they wrote and
Mm.
to renew my relationship with the written word, because in those two moments the spoken word was challenging
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I would imagine. I would imagine. Yeah, those are. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to have those interviews, and but because of your energy and because you engage in a way where people feel that, yeah, I've known this person. You're more. If I can imagine, it would feel more like I'm sharing with my sister or my friend or someone that cares about me,
Yeah, yeah,
who is picking apart and asking me questions about my life, about this particular incident that happened. But it's not just an incident, it's a whole.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, I asked this question. This is the final question, Vivian.
Okay.
I have about 150 more, but I'm going to ask the final
Well,
question.
Kathy McCoy got two segments. Maybe I need to. That's
Oh,
somebody else that I adore, by the way.
I love. Oh, stop.
Oh,
Okay. See,
oh.
I know. I know. She's
Kathy
amazing.
and her twin sister Heather. I mean, I've known them since they were like 12.
Twin?
Yeah,
She was
yeah,
a twin?
yeah. She's a twin. She
How
didn't
did I
say that.
not know that?
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Kathy and Heather's mother and I were best friends for a very long time, and their mother
Oh,
transitioned a couple of years ago, and I had not seen them in a very long time. But yeah, yeah.
wow.
Kathy McCoy, man, she is a powerhouse. And so is Heather. They are amazing.
Oh, wow. Small,
Yeah.
world, but Vivian world. So yeah, we all know. Um, so on a scale from 1 to 10, one is, oh, you already answered this, but we're gonna kind of anyway. On a scale from 1 to 10, one being this life is hard. This was the wrong, it's too much. I don't want this life. I want to do over, I want another life. 10 is I can't imagine a more amazing life. I mean, even if I tried to mix something up, I could not conjure up or make a more amazing story for my life.
Mm.
What would you give yourself? And if if it's not a 10, do you know what would make it a 10?
Yeah. I mean, more money.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me just be, what do they call it? In the flesh. The church people call it being in the
Yeah.
flesh. I mean, but here's the thing about having more money, and I will answer this question, and I suppose that would make it an absolute 10. I just think about all the things that I could do for other people.
Mhm, mhm,
All the things that I could actually make possible.
mhm.
That is what makes it I'll say a 10.5, because this is my life. This
Mhm,
is the only life I have.
mhm.
So it is a 10. And every day when I write in my journal, I start my journal with all thanks and praises for this day.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been given this day. And that's not something I take for granted.
Yeah.
I have had a lot of struggle in my life, but I'm not defined by that struggle. That struggle is what has led me to be better, I suppose, to try to be the best version of myself, not the best version of some social media image, the best version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my job every day, is to live up to that.
Yeah.
So it's a 10. It's my life. It's the only life.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end. So Vivian Phillips, I love you. To the moon. Like, you are so amazing. So, but I'm not gonna cry.
Me either.
But you're amazing. So thank you for just being you and sharing space and sharing energy and sharing your voice and lifting us up and knowing somehow how to say things that redirect people and we can change the trajectory of their lives.
It's a gift that I'm very, very honored to possess, and it is not taken lightly, but it is also authentic.
Yes, it is.
And I adore you, and I appreciate you, and it is the most honored thing to be connected with you in this way and to watch you work. And please say hello to Beverly.
I will definitely do so. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
I'm going to have you back.
Okay.
Okay. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please click the small bell and become a subscriber and join me in spreading the message of grace.